You're listening to Southpod, Rise of a Region, hosted by Stanfield Gray and John Yarian.
Mark, thanks for joining me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's an honor that you asked me to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. In a moment, we're going to get into some of your amazing achievements, your professional experience, all this interesting stuff you're involved in today. But I want to start with something I uncovered about you that secretly you used to be or were involved in making games. Do you self-identify as a gamer? Were you a gamer way back when?
Yes, I was a gamer, like video games.
You hesitate as though that's a humiliating admission. Is that bad?
I believe I was addicted to them, yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I think it was true addiction, and it wasn't something that, wouldn't ever allow myself, and I call it the embarrassment of going to something called GA, Gamers Anonymous.
Really?
But I kicked it myself. And
well, this got to a dark place really fast. I read in your bio. I'm really interested. I read in your bio that early on you were making games, maybe for the Mac or app. Okay.
Yeah, because there weren't any at the time. This was in the early '90s. Yeah, early '90s, and a bunch of our friends, we were fans of Macintosh because it was, to me, Macs. The engineers did their jobs. Whereas a PC was kind of unfinished and you had to go in and do a lot of work to get anything to work. Just fine, people used to deal with that. But Macs were almost like a finished product. The engineers really spent a lot of time, user experience, like our smartphones that we have today, same DNA. But we needed some games. So then a couple folks wanted to do games, but there were two coders. I was the artist. So I hand painted the cover art. I wrote the plot line of the game and the manual and did all the artistic stuff for the game and figured all that stuff out. Desktop publishing, really great experience that was useful later when I did.
Can you give me an example? What's a game that you remember that you enjoyed or were proud of? What was it about, or what was
it was a turn-based strategy war game. So it was, and I came up with all this stuff. It was called Lagomorph.
That's tremendous.
And Lagomorph is the genus name for rabbits and hares. And so this was an alternative universe or solar system that consisted of 4 planets. And the Lagomorphs were the sentient beings, not humans. And they had to battle their way towards the sun, where the nice Earth-like planet was.
That's fantastic. That's really interesting. And orient me in time and space. So you're doing this.
I quit
a few
college
years ago.
for a year.
Okay.
And my sister was not happy. My parents were not alive at the time, but she's like, "You need to get back to school."
I
did it for about a year.
Okay.
And we sold maybe 1,500 copies. That's it.
Wow.
And lost all the money we put into it, which is only
tremendous.
Like $5,000.
And what of that experience, if anything, informed what you did later? I mean, what were you discovering in the way you got involved in games and game creation that hinted at the work you do now in a different
creativity, just like and independent problem solving or complex problem solving. Like, okay, we have no idea what we're doing here, but we'll just figure it out as we go along.
Do you miss narrative creation? I mean, is there an aspect of your life that's involved in creative expression through storytelling or other things, or do you kind of scratch that?
I miss the art. So over the years, I dabbled in I got to do a lot of sculpture with my probably my best friend in the world, Dale Rogers. He's a sculptor, and did a bunch of work with him, engineering some of his sculptures, helping to make sure they weren't going to collapse on somebody. But then actually, that outlet of making sculpture and stuff like that, it turned into the outlet less. I do. It's really, to your question, it was the artistic side, not the writing. We wrote it was kind of a light top level brushing of this concept. It wasn't, you need to get in deep and do deep character development and this sort of narrative. It was sort of a light, fun,
Yeah. Well, now that I've outed you as the creator of Lagomorph and made that your legacy for all time, And I don't want to lose that theme entirely. The passion, I can tell that was something you were into. You alluded to how all-consuming that was for you, and it speaks to your character and how you approach your work. Let's skip ahead to present day and think a little bit about your activities now at the Zucker Institute of Applied Neuroscience. Maybe help define that for me. What is that big jumble of words I just said? What do you guys do there? And then we'll think a little bit more about your
In
role
2 words, it's technology acceleration.
Okay.
So and technology can be anything. It could be, in the case of what we're doing, it's medical or life science technology. So it could be a drug, a diagnosis, or a treatment. And a treatment could be, a drug, a therapy, or it could be like a device that you use to treat somebody. But it's all about taking ideas that otherwise are just sitting there floating around in space and turning them into actual products that are used to help patients. And it's all about, as a medical device accelerator, it's all about helping patients.
And you're doing that here at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, or out of some private office? Or what is the method by which you get these ideas? How do they come to you, and how are they turned into something else? We serve neurosciences. That's the neuroscience. Yep.
It's an experiment that the university allowed to occur. They supported this experiment where we would, because of the folks that were running neuroscience at the neurosciences department at the time, inspired to get these ideas out of the surgeons' heads or off of the lab bench, and turn them into products. Because having them just sit in the surgeon's head or sit on a bench top in a laboratory does not help patients.
And that makes perfect sense to me, although 5 seconds ago you described this as an experiment. Is this...
just the structure of the...
Okay.
To allow us to exist was an experiment. So it's something that they had never done before. And a completely different model that's been done, certainly hasn't been done here, and maybe shades of it have been done elsewhere, but very unique structure to solve a problem that they were having. So you're experimenting with a solution to solve this technology transfer problem.
And is this more common in larger hospital systems, larger metropolitan areas? Is the process you just described, this experiment they hadn't done before here in Charleston in South Carolina, would I be more likely to find it in New York or LA? What's Boston, the universe of this?
It's places where large medical teaching institutions that are tied to engineering schools, even like at Johns Hopkins, where you have all the elements that you need to create companies, basically, or foster the development of new ideas. So you need, especially for medical devices, that you really need to start with a clinician, someone who's actually practicing, gonna actually use it, gonna be a customer of the technology. Then typically some of them can, but typically they can't do everything else that it takes to get a product to market themselves. Engineers, if it's a medical device, very critical. Marketing folks, what is it that's needed in the marketplace? What will be accepted? And then sales folks, building a team that can sell the device and even sell it to a corporate partner that can actually spend the money, regulatory experts that can move it through the FDA, and then back to a sales team that can actually distribute it to surgeons around whatever the country or the world.
Yeah, I mean, considering the ecosystem you're describing, all the factors that would come together, that would the petri dish, if you will, that would make this work. Surprising to me, that's in Charleston, which I love. Charleston's an amazing city. Atlanta seems likelier, maybe Charlotte. I'm surprised that this is possible, that the factors are in place here to make this work, so that you're here and we can have this conversation. Do you have
other people would say it's not?
And why is that? Why, educate me. Why is it?
The medical university sort of is there, and it sort of stands alone. And sure, there's like Roper next to it, but we don't have an engineering school, of note here. We have Citadel that's kind of up and coming, but I've been over there, and because I showed up to their talk, they added medical on the bottom of their there's the slide that said what kind of engineering we're going to go into.
So by your mere attendance, you influenced the presentation. They very quickly...
Yeah, I think they deleted it after I left. But, and they're great guys. I'd love to, work with them more. They're certainly, driven, passionate instructors over there that, can certainly pump out incredible engineers. But it was all geared towards, aerospace or civil engineering or, a mechanical engineer from the Citadel is probably going to want to work on a tank or something. Or an airplane, potentially. But
well, I thought you were going to argue me out of this. I'm over here saying I don't feel like I didn't know the pieces were in place in Charleston to be successful in this form of, evolving these ideas to market or to make products out of things existing in researchers' heads. You're suggesting it is, and that's because the medical university is here and has a level of independence and interest in it.
Well, the argument is, it doesn't matter who's going to win the argument because it just matters of whether us as an accelerator can be successful. So yes, we're missing, a critical mass on several components, but it doesn't mean you have just enough to get done what you need to get done.
Well, you're here and you're doing it, so it's unlikely I'm going to win the argument. But I'm curious though if being here and fostering this kind of, I guess you're in the business of catalyzing something, right? So taking an idea and moving it to another place.
And creating what we're missing.
Right, exactly.
Which is all about what we're doing, because all the stuff that we're working on doesn't exist. So we're creating everything.
Right. And it raises so many questions in my mind about how you occupy your time and where your focus lies. Is it just the frantic accumulation of any idea you can find to begin from the concept itself, or are you in the business of environment or ecosystem creation for idea management? In other words, are you at a Citadel or a College of Charleston or advocating with policymakers or others to improve the Petri dish itself, if that makes sense?
We do some of that, yeah. So certainly interfacing with organizations such as SC Bio, that's here to promote bio life sciences in South Carolina. Whatever we can do to support that. Most of the folks that we can have a conversation with are part of that organization, and they'll be here in a week or two having their annual conference here. So that's a great place to meet like-minded folks that want to work and only want to work in this area.
And I can tell by your accent, you're incredibly Southern. You're clearly from maybe the Mississippi Delta or... No, that's not true at all. What brings you personally? Obviously, you're here for the position, but I mean, where did you come from, and what's your orientation to the South as a region?
It was for this job,
right.
But I relocated here from Dallas. I had been in Dallas because the company I'd worked for moved me there from New Jersey, and I was in New Jersey. I followed my girlfriend at the time, was my wife now, from Boston, which is where I born, raised, and I was educated in upstate New York, not in Boston.
Well, you're a perfect third-party objective observer to speak to something we argue about all the time here, which is whether or not Texas is really part of the South. In the vernacular, when we talk about South, geographically, obviously Texas is down there, but Texas is Texas. So if you were in Dallas and you've come here, what's your own mental map of what you consider the South to be versus the Southwest or something else? And
Texas,
I want you to get this right because I have my opinion about
Texas. I'll make sure I get it right. Texas, I think by nature they just want to be separate or be defined as separate. So it's great that you could define Texas as someone else could define Texas as the South, but they're just going to argue with you. So I think you just walk around and poll people. Where do you want to be, or where do you identify? But to draw the line, I don't...
You passed, Mark. You're right. That's the correct answer. Texas is an independent republic that grudgingly accepts its statehood.
Yes.
With reluctance. And so you come here, and Charleston, South Carolina, I think, fits the more global or national perspective of what Southernness is, right? If that's all
South
these
Carolina
cliches.
might, but I'm not sure about Charleston.
Really? Defend that. What do you mean by
that? Not that I study it too much, but I don't find... like, it's red versus blue states or whatever you want to call it. It's a red state, but it's a lot of blue people.
Blue city.
Bump into a lot of blue people. Yep. So I guess get exposed enough to the state as a whole to, draw political lines, I guess.
Okay.
In that regard.
Okay, that's diplomatic, but I'll accept it. Did you ever think that a career like yours, involved in the work that you are, would bring you to a place like Charleston, or is that sort of a shocking turn of events? Because you seem like don't take this the wrong way, but you seem like somebody who should be in Boston or Chicago.
Get out of here?
No. I'd love to have you here, but are you as surprised as I am?
It's sort of it's just life's journey. For a reason brought me here.
So no expectations, nothing whatsoever.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, before we get to the middle part of the career and talk more about what brought you to this point, can you share examples of technologies or ideas you're working on? You probably can't, but are there any hints? Is there anything?
I certainly can. So neurosciences at the time when we got the contract, which is kind of defines our fence of what we're allowed to touch, encompassed 3 distinct departments, and you'd call it neuroscience, like basic science, where like they're doing research on smoking cessation or analyzing like how the brain patterns work, or a drug, basic science stuff. Neurology, so you might epilepsy, Parkinson's, different disease states that affect the brain, and then neurosurgery. And neurosurgery was my entrance to Charleston, where the first person I met from Charleston was Dr. Bruce Frankel. He's a neurosurgeon, and he was So so you have those. Yeah.
So those areas, if that's the playground you're in.
Yeah.
Maybe you can't. Can you share an example of something that came out of it that's becoming a product or a protectable piece of property?
Yeah. So I started to drift, but neurosurgery is the surgeons are very technical. They're in the OR, and there's a lot of gear that they deal with. So a good amount, about half of what we deal with, would be related to neurosurgery or some kind of surgical piece of equipment, whether it's an implant that stays in a person's body or just a device that might help in surgery to make things move along or whatnot. But with neurology, we have folks that think about concussions and help people recover from strokes. And, they look at a diagnostic device that could potentially tell whether you have a concussion or not reliably with objective measures in 20 seconds, say. And that's one of our technologies that we just licensed to a local startup called Blink TBI, and it's a fairly effective concussion detector that we think and they think will be a front runner in that space because you can't cheat it. So all these other things about concussion, you can learn about the things, and it's, a tough subjective call to say whether someone has a concussion or not. So if you can add objectivity to that, which a lot of companies are trying to work on, it's great. But you have this thing about the NFL, even top players admitting that they've thrown their baseline. They've cheated the test so that they can stay in the game. So if you have something that can't be cheated, we think is the ultimate. That's what we think we came up with and licensed.
That's a very interesting example on a few levels. One that obviously has social and cultural ramifications, right? So that's an example of a technology that would literally have a real impact, I think, in sports, in sports viewership, entertainment, and consumption. Does that drive or influence your work? Is that something that you feel a moral or ethical responsibility towards, that the work you're doing will go out and change lives? I mean, is that part of the process for you, or part of the satisfaction?
Absolutely,
perhaps?
The plan. Yeah, I do. One of the things with I had when I got out of school, and as we talked earlier, I was playing around with games, and not that that's a bad thing, but I was when I got out of school, I was playing around with speakers, consumer audio. And then I switched to a company that worked on just medical devices, and I realized that was like the calling that I wanted. From that point on, I wanted to use all my skills, whatever, brain power and everything, to work on medical devices, because I realized that could have an effect on patients' lives. And we're all, at some point, patients or going to be patients. Certainly factors with my family, spent too much time in hospitals when I was in high school, and So it hadn't clicked until my second job out of college, second real job. But especially here, it's really, you jump out of bed and don't need coffee when you know that you can spend the day using creative brain power to, advance a technology, advance something that's inspired by a clinician or a combination of an engineer and a clinician, to move it to the marketplace. It never existed, and now that it's there, it can save more patients. It can do it in a cheaper, faster manner. So everybody across the board, it's engineered to, across the board, benefit all the stakeholders, not just, this is better for the patient. Yeah, but it costs $100,000. No, it's better for the patient. It costs the hospital less. The distributor can distribute it easier. The manufacturer can manufacture it easier. Across the board, it's just better than what was there.
The concussion technology is called... Is it named? Does it have a... Did I miss it? What's...
Blink TBI.
Okay, it's called Blink.
Because it's
Blink
based
TBI.
on the Blink reflexometer.
Okay.
So they call it, based on the Blink reflex, we call it a Blink reflexometer is the name of the device. But the company branded itself as Blink TBI. So it's Blink Traumatic Brain Injury.
So that's... Folks can search Blink TBI. We can find out more about this. And this is...
BlinkTBI.com.
BlinkTBI.com. This is some kind of a headset? Is it goggles? Is it...
It's a large cart right now, but they're shrinking it down. So you'll see on their website now they're shrinking it to sort of a handheld device, much like I'd say a bullhorn, but you wouldn't necessarily stick a bullhorn right up on your face. But it's like a scuba mask kind of thing that you with a box. And it has to kind of isolate your eyes.
Hang on, you've referenced a large cart, a bullhorn, and a scuba mask.
It's all
and
those
now
in
I'm terrified.
Yes.
So this is some sort of horrifying H.G. Wells contraption. In my... Because I don't know anything. I just know the headlines and the zeitgeist of the culture, and so I think about football and I think about, CTE. I think about a sideline, right? And that's probably a pretty shallow interpretation of where this technology could go. But I immediately think of a football sideline. I think of a young person, maybe a high school football player, gets in a collision. There's visible or tangible signs, perhaps of wooziness or maybe a lack of muscle control.
Or none of that. You just see that was a really bad hit.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Someone catches it.
Exactly.
It was a really bad hit.
And then you roll up the cart/bullhorn/scuba mask.
Yeah. A year from now, when they actually sell the device, it'll be handheld.
It'll be smaller.
So maybe it sits on a monopole, but they'll be able to sit the person down and kind of bring this thing over. It's small. It's nice. It's smooth edges, and it'll be very friendly. Put it up against their face. It'll read their responses, how their eyes respond to certain stimuli. And then within 20 seconds, you know that you need to take the guy off.
So this is pretty remarkable. I mean, on one level, tracking the development of this product is, I guess, a way to time the death of football as a major sport in America. I mean, information like this really makes the consequences of those collisions and brain trauma inescapable, I think.
Whereas before it was escapable?
Well, I think
it
existed in a more interpretive space, and for those who didn't want to see it, who didn't want to face the consequences of it.
Right. Yeah.
I think, indicators, empirical, verifiable data like this, that's in 20 seconds, right? So it's instantaneous. Makes it very, very difficult to put that kid back in the game, to now you can track these incidences over time. You can say this young person or adult has had this many verified concussion incidents. This is not a matter of debate.
And to what you said, I believe you said CTE.
Well, so the long-term effects.
Yeah. So if we can track the way these biometrics drift over time, possibly you could do that.
So I'm excited. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I wouldn't be certainly football is not something we want to attack or eliminate. But having the data is good, and just there's. When you see these stories of these, fathers have these sons and they're sitting there in their office and behind them is a menagerie of paraphernalia. I forget what the proper term should be, but a lot of footballs and pictures and,
trophies.
Trophies. Yeah. It's a shrine to football. And his son is out there on the field.
Yep.
And he couldn't be happier. This dad couldn't be happier. And the son really wants to stay in the game and really, I don't know what his motivation is, but the kid, is out there playing and, doesn't want to be taken out of the game, wants to be in there so he can, whatever. Maybe it's please somebody or please his parents and his dad who's cheering like crazy in the stands. It's high school. It's Friday night lights. It's dark. It could be raining or drizzling or whatever, and so you have poor visibility. On the kid gets hit, bad hit. He's on the sidelines, and they're gonna observe what's going on, or they're gonna ignore it because they're gonna get that kid back in. He's a star player, but he had a concussion, or he had a concussion in practice the day before, and they are like this mentality, which is fine. Shake it off, get back in there. Let's get this done. Let's win this game. But he has damage, and they're ignoring it. Put him back in. He gets hit again, and he's dead.
Well, the exciting thing about science is that you don't have to be for or against anything.
Right.
It just is.
I am. I'm for that kid.
Well, I am too. But my point is that we don't have to be opposed to any sport or endeavor, as long as we all agree to look at the evidence.
Right. Just don't ignore the data.
And the evidence will
and use the best tools that you have, and yeah.
Do you personally have any experience with head trauma? Have you ever been dinged, gotten a little woozy, had your bell rung?
By the time I was, I think, I forget, maybe my memory's fuzzy, but by the time I was 9 years old, I had 6 concussions.
Maybe that's why your memory's fuzzy.
It certainly has. It's a
doesn't
factor.
Help.
Yeah, it doesn't. One of them, I was hospitalized for at least 2, and one of them I had, I don't know if I was knocked out, but I had amnesia.
Yeah.
So I didn't remember the events a couple hours before I got hit and a couple hours after I got hit.
So I'm curious your experience of this, and I don't know if there was more later. I hope there was no more head trauma later, but I've had the experience of being knocked all the way out.
Yeah.
It's not a great story. It was a bucket. It was an accident. There was no fight.
Oh, most of mine were terrible.
It was very, very mundane. But one thing that I experienced consciously that I think is natural, and this is how the brain defends itself, is you immediately begin impersonating the behavior of somebody who's fine. Like it's very difficult internally to express a state of confusion and orientation to time or space or anything. Like I think we naturally as humans mimic normal behavior. Like we immediately want to represent ourselves as fine or thinking correctly.
Yeah.
And this relates to Alzheimer's. So Alzheimer's with individuals suffering
any
from
kind of
disease.
dementia.
Right.
Yeah.
So within an environment that they're relatively accustomed to, or a space that they have some level of comfort within that space and at certain times, they can very accurately mimic normal, like human behavior. You get them out of that space, and then you discover, that this person is not oriented to reality in any way. I think that's a big part of the reason why this technology is so vital. Is it actually acts against this natural instinct. Maybe it's motivated by that kid's strong desire to play football, but it's also just, all of us have a desire to represent our thinking as correct or accurate.
Yeah, we're fine,
Yeah,
we're physically fine. Yeah, and I don't know the parts of the brain that would drive that. What's great about what Blink measures is that it's a primitive instinct. So it's made with the core, kind of brainstem. I describe it in more layman's terms. But it's a trigger, a primal trigger that kicks in to protect, to continue to protect the brain. So you may use, I think, your prefrontal cortex and your ego to say, I'm fine, check it off, and kind of think through it.
Yep.
But there's something core that's going on in your brain that's reacting and moving and reacting in such a way to have that protective instinct. I'm injured, I need to protect myself, and it shows up in the blink reflex.
So what I'm hearing is you're not from the South. You've come here purely by happenstance for a job, and that job is resulting in you creating technology that will effectively destroy football, which is the one thing the South is better than anybody else at. Is that a fair summary, Mark? Is that what you're here to do? Are you here to ruin the SEC?
I did not. It was not my intention.
That's what's going on?
Do anything to football, right?
Okay.
Yeah, USC.
Okay.
And Clemson.
Well, let's shift gears slightly and talk a little bit about your experience with colleagues, with your team, with attracting talent. So you're in Charleston, South Carolina. We've talked a little bit about how, you're here, this is working, it's experimental, it hasn't been done before, at least in this location.
Yeah.
you're pulling it off. What's it like for you to find the resources you need to move this operation forward beyond Blink? I mean, talking about the totality of what the Institute is looking for and hoping to effectuate. Is that difficult? Is it easy? What's it like being in Charleston trying to do that?
There is a lack of resources, but somehow the ones that we need show up. I think you mentioned Blink TBI also. So we've spun that off. So that's out of our hands. Yeah,
right. That would be that's the proof of concept of what you're doing is getting something from an idea to now spun off.
Yeah, and that team will go and find resources wherever they need to, and they are still here in Charleston, but they'll find the resources that they need. For me, it's we need resources that are on the ground in the hospital. It's one of the things that works best for us, and we are right in the hospital between the offices of clinicians, so that they can, on their way back to the office, we're right there. They don't have to put any extra effort. They just veer off a little bit, and they can come talk to us about something that went wrong. But so one of the things that is key is that proximity. And the amount, the fact that we can collide with our innovators, our innovator customers, right in the hallway. So, hey, doctor, so and so, how's it going? Oh yeah, I'm on my way back to surgery. Hey, how's surgery going? Anything crazy going on in surgery that might be able to have a discussion about, like to invent some technology around, whatever. Just things like that. We can kind of constantly slip that into the dialogue, and that's changed the culture. So they know, hey, I'm just going to swing over to Mark's office and say, hey, what about this? What if we did this?
So proximity inside the health system is critical. Yeah. There's obviously huge efficiencies there between you and your team, the providers and the researchers that are innovating this. I have to believe there are secondary, tertiary talent you need. There's got to be and perhaps not, I might be wrong about this, but...
No, absolutely. And we've, again, been blessed with folks that's shown up that are just super talented. So maybe it's that they're drawn to us or we're doing something. And we do go out and recruit talent. We as I mentioned, we have engineers, so we have, and they have, the engineers, most engineers come from Clemson, which is great. Yeah. Because they have a bioengineering program, and we want them to, stay in South Carolina instead of going off. Typically they leave. There's no real, ecosystem or cluster of biomedical or medical device companies here. So any biomechanical engineer is going to leave the state, which is just keep that brain power here.
It's interesting. I mean, I have to believe you're experiencing on some level what a lot of companies, public and private sector, and when you're looking for engineering and technical skills, the bad news is you probably have to import talent from outside the state or the South. The good news is increasingly people want to come here.
Yes.
So you've got this responsibility to identify and go through the more challenging process of locating talent, but having found it, people seem to want to come down here. They seem to like the idea.
Yeah, what I've done in the last couple decades is run engineering teams. So even in Dallas, where it's a major metropolitan area, again there wasn't a cluster of the thinking was, well, if I move to Dallas and it doesn't work out, I'm moving again. So I'm not going to move to Dallas. I'll stay in New Jersey, where there's a whole bunch of medical device companies. I'll just stay here. I'll stay in Boston, or I'll stay in San Diego. I won't move to Dallas because something happens. Where am I going to go? So we don't have that ecosystem here either, but we have, I think, a nicer beach than Dallas. We have,
I think that's a fair statement. Yeah.
At least we have the beaches and
and
rivers that are maybe nicer than in Dallas, and more green.
Yeah, I'd say so.
More green, more trees.
Well, let's go into rapid fire as we get to the end of our time together, because I know you got many other really important things to do. Tell me about a couple things that you enjoy or have really found interesting about being in the South, whether it's food or the beach you just referenced. What's here that you've uncovered that you like or have responded to?
Certainly the aspects of the weather. It gets humid, but this is the same water that I grew up near as in Boston, be able to swim in Hingham Harbor for a year in August, and here you can kind of swim year round, which is great. It's the same, it feels like home, and I can actually go in the water. It's not freezing. Food is great. Yeah, the variety. Dallas has some great places to eat, but it's a lot of chain stores, over and over, strip malls. Where here, it's every restaurant. No, there's no chains, I don't think. I guess there are, but
there's very few. I think part of the Dallas thing is it's so vast. People don't realize that Dallas-Fort Worth is roughly the size of Los Angeles. So they reference Dallas, and you think of it as a town.
And if I could just figure out what Los Angeles is the size of.
Well, so it's really more a question of individuated neighborhoods, and I mean, you can't just make Dallas dinner recommendations. It's insane. This place would be 2 hours apart. Yeah, you have to go more limited. What's some stuff that's driving you nuts? What do you not love so much? What do we need to work on?
Well, in Dallas, when you talk about the sprawl, they seem to build ahead in infrastructure.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, I commuted on a highway that was 3 lanes both directions with a 3-lane in both directions access road. It's really tough to clog that up. It was I think the speed limit was probably wasn't 85. But I've been on roads in Texas that were 85.
Oh yeah. I read an interesting piece of research that suggested if the suburban sprawl continues at the current pace, I think this is in the City Journal, that Atlanta...
In Dallas?
That Atlanta and Charlotte will touch within the next maybe 20 or 30 years, which is horrifying to think about. Okay, so sprawl, poor planning, I hear you.
Oh, Charleston? Yeah.
Oh, I just mean the South in general. I hear you.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I mean, I don't see it as... I don't really observe it as something negative, though.
Well, good. No, that makes you popular with the listeners. They'll like it. Good for you. Last thing before we get you out of here, what's the road ahead? So we've got this thing in place. The experiment appears to be successful, right? Yeah. Blink, TBI. I suppose we could look at as the proof of concept that ideas can be moved forward and commercialized.
It's about probably one of 3 technologies, or maybe even 4 technologies that we'll license this year. So that was we licensed another one just a short while ago, shortly after Blink, and we'll be able to announce that in the future. So it was great. It was our 3rd license, and we're keeping quiet about it because the company wants to have it announced when they launch. So that
you don't want to break news right here with me to my
I'll
of
come
listeners.
I'll come back when we license our 4th license, which we're working on our 4th license now, and we hope to be working on our 5th license later this month. So
okay, fair enough.
So that's when we look at metrics for other accelerators, it's a good ratio of raw ideas. Most of them are terrible, like 90 to 95% of them aren't going to make it. Not that they're terrible, that they need more work. Let's say that. That's what we usually say, and it's true.
It's polite. Yeah.
They have circled back with ideas that then make it through.
Need more work in the sense that you need to change it completely. That's the truth about most of my ideas.
Can be because someone's already thought of it. Someone's already thought of it, and it's just not in front of your face. So So we deal with that with a patent database, and then it's kind of hidden things. But we have a certain percentage that make it through our process. We have a filtering process. We get the technologies that then become active projects in our system, and then we get external funding. So we've funded 6 of 7 projects that we've activated. We just haven't even asked for the 7th. Usually we get funding. We do a good job in presenting something that's viable to get funded. And so the 6 ones that have been funded, we've licensed 3 of them, half of them, and we are working on the 4th, which would be 2/3, which is most accelerators only have that, get to that point, about 2/3 of the active projects that they get. So we're hitting that, and I believe we'll exceed that because we'll get 5/7, and then we'll get 6/7, and then we'll add more projects. So I think we'll stay above that threshold. So we know our filter. When we select a project, we know so far that we've done a good job, and it's has a good likelihood of making it to market, or at least making it out there.
That's huge.
Which is
that's terrific. Well, thank you for your work, Mark Semler, Zucker Institute of Applied Neuroscience at the Medical University of South Carolina here in Charleston. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Southpod, Rise of a Region, where innovators dish on success, failure, and a rapidly evolving South.